Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share a part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome once more. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. Through the gifts of technology, we also gather virtually to celebrate community and connections as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Welcome to all those who are joining us in this way today. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love.
Arise, O souls, all arise.
Good morning. I'm David Yackel, a member of All Souls, and we're glad that you are joining us either here in person or online. We now have the pleasure of recognizing those visiting us for the first time. If you are a first-time visitor, please stand or raise your hand, and we have a gift for you. We want you to know that you are welcome here with all the identities that you hold in your fullness as a person. We hope that you will bring your whole self to this time together. Fellow members, I hope that you will introduce yourselves to the new faces among us and extend your own personal welcome to begin a conversation that has the potential to last for decades. I also want to welcome to our service Charles Dickinson on the piano and Darrington as our song leader, and then Reverend Aaron has a special introduction as well.
I am so excited that our guest preacher this morning, the Reverend Leslie Mills, is here. She is a wonderful minister and a good friend. We met in seminary. We took Reverend Kendall's UU worship class together, and she is one of my good friends. Leslie has served congregations here in the Midwest. She lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and she practices a form of martial arts called Ki Aikido, which is a Japanese martial art. So let us welcome Leslie.
Well, thank you for such a warm welcome. And now I'll welcome you in. Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, and the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together, we make it a holy place.
Here today, in this place and with these people, may we listen so that we can hear, may we hear so that we can feel, may we feel so that we can know, and may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice we light our way. This morning's Time for All Ages is a video with words spoken by Alan Watts, a British philosopher who brought Eastern religion to Western audience in the mid-1900s. He would often record his popular lectures, and they are now widely available for free online. In this particular clip, he invites us to take a look at the nature of the universe and how a shift in our perspectives and in our relationship to nature itself might change our understanding about how we want to live our lives as a human part of the universe.
That existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at. But that it is best understood by analogy with music. Because music, as an art form, is essentially playful. We say you play the piano. You don't work the piano. Why? Music differs from, say, travel. When you travel, you are trying to get somewhere. One doesn't make the end of a composition the point of the composition. If that were so, the best conductors would be those who played fastest. And there would be composers who wrote only finales. People go to a concert just to hear one crashing chord, because that's the end. Same way in dancing. You don't aim at a particular spot in the room. That's where you should arrive. The whole point of the dancing is the dance. Now, but we don't see that as something brought by our education into our everyday conduct. We've got a system of schooling which gives a completely different impression. It's all graded. And what we do is we put the child into the corridor of this grade system with a kind of, come on, kitty, kitty, kitty. And yeah, you're going to kindergarten, you know. And that's a great thing, because when you finish that, you'll get into first grade. And then, come on, first grade leads to second grade, and so on. And then you get out of grade school, you go to high school, and it's revving up, the thing is coming. Then you're going to go to college, and by Jove, then you get into graduate school. And when you're through with graduate school, you go out to join the world. And then you get into some racket where you're selling insurance. And they've got that quota to make. And you're going to make that. And all the time, the thing is coming. It's coming. It's coming. That great thing, the success you're working for. Then when you wake up one day about 40 years old, you say, my God, I've arrived. I'm there. And you don't feel very different from what you always felt. By expectation. Look at the people who live to retire and put those savings away. And then when they're 65, they don't have any energy left. They're more or less impotent. And they go and rot in an old people's senior citizens community. Because we've simply cheated ourselves the whole way down the line. We thought of life by analogy with a journey, with a pilgrimage, which had a serious purpose at the end, and the thing was to get to that end, success or whatever it is, or maybe heaven after you're dead. But we missed the point the whole way along. It was a musical thing, and you were supposed to sing or to dance while the music was being played.
Time that nothing's right. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
You would stay standing and join me in our covenant. Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and love, and to help one another. Now, if you'll join me in singing our children to their classes.
Go now in peace, may love guide all your ways. Beauty be the blessings of your nights and days. Truth on your lips and kindness in your deeds. Faith to follow where the human spirit leads.
There it is. All right. Good morning again. All right. So this morning I am here to invite and introduce you to our offering today. I thought a lot about what I wanted to say today, and at this point, I wanted to share with how much All Souls means to me at different parts of my life. There are changing seasons, and what you need at different times is different. And All Souls has been that for me. And I hope that today with our offering, you see that your financial contribution can help keep All Souls here so that we can be there for different people at whatever stage of life they happen to be in. So at this point, we will take up the offering, and we appreciate your gifts. And if you will speak with me the words of our dedication. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change towards a just and compassionate society.
I'd like to share with you, for our first reading, a series of excerpts from an academic text by Thomas P. Casoulis titled Intimacy or Integrity, Philosophy and Cultural Difference. In this book, Casoulis draws upon his deep knowledge of both American and Japanese philosophies to paint with broad strokes the portraits of two cultural worldviews, one called integrity and one called intimacy. He writes, "One of the most basic questions we can ask is how things are related. We will explore two essentially different ways of relating, two different worldviews, two different ways of understanding the self, and two different ways of constructing value. And this could be referred to as cultural difference. What exactly do we mean by cultural difference? The real disparity lies in what aspect of our humanness a cultural tradition tends to emphasize. To put it simply, different cultures tend to think about different things, to pick out different aspects of a single phenomenon as the part most worthy of attention. Japanese culture can be broadly characterized as highlighting a fundamental orientation towards intimacy. In contrast, we might characterize contemporary American culture with the name integrity. So what do we mean by intimacy and integrity? Casoulis demonstrates the differences through a series of images showing the way Japanese and American cultures tend to experience the relationship of the self to that which is outside the self. So we'll be using a series of slides to help illustrate some of these ideas. So one significant difference between the two cultures is the way we relate to one another and the world around us. This slide shows the viewpoint of integrity, in which there is a public, external way of relating, as you can see with the lines connecting the two circles, labeled R for relationship. Both circles exist independently of one another, and the relationship is that link between these otherwise separate entities. Casoulis writes, "When thinking in terms of integrity and inquiring into a relation between A and B, I typically ask what connects the two. In doing so, I'm asking what R is, what that relationship is. What is it that associates A's integrity and B's integrity? If that relation is broken or dissolved, A is still A and B is still B. In other words, if A and B enter into a relation, A and B are essentially unchanged. The relation is something A and B possess. It is something external that belongs to them." Casoulis says, with the termination of an external relationship, the two parts maintain their integrity and exist as unbroken, unviolated wholes. In the next slide, we'll see a contrast. In the worldview of intimacy, the relationship is personal and internal. And we can see here that the circles overlap like a Venn diagram, and that shaded area is labeled R, the relationship between them. Casoulis says, intimacy is not merely personal, but personal in a special way. When in the locus of intimacy, one feels they belong there. Among those persons, places, and things with which I am in intimate relation, I am comfortable. I feel at home and at peace. It is part of the essential nature of the two relatants that they are connected as they are. They are interdependent, not independent entities. The internal relation is part of both things. To dissolve an internal relationship, as we see in this diagram, would not merely disconnect them, it would actually transform an aspect of the relatants themselves. So, if I were to lose anything with which I am in intimate relation, my family, my close friends, my home, even my dog-eared reference books, I would lose more than something I have. I would be losing part of myself. Terminating an internal relationship results in both relatants losing a part of their identity. The A and the B become less themselves, or at least less of what they had been. So let's begin applying these ideas to how we might perceive the self. In this next slide, we'll return to the Western viewpoint. So here we see the self in the center, labeled A, and it's connected through that series of lines indicating all those external relationships in this individual's life. Casoulis writes, "It follows that people understand themselves differently in the two cultural orientations. In an integrity orientation, as we see here, my identity corresponds to the fixed boundaries of the ego, or the perceived self. Although I see myself connected to many other things, none of these things is literally part of me. In this context, to find myself means to discover who I am, independent of external factors. This may lead to a strong sense of autonomy. My relationships are not what I am, but that to which I have independently chosen to be connected." We'll see the contrast in our next slide. And here we have the Japanese understanding of self. Casoulis writes, "Because intimacy is defined by connection with others, my identity in the intimacy orientation, represented as that white A in the center, overlaps with what is outside my perceived self, represented by that whole shaded-in circle. Rather than the independence of integrity, intimacy favors interdependence. In an intimacy orientation, to find myself means that I see how I am interconnected with and interdependent with many other entities. My self-discovery discovers the interdependence defining my life." So in the next slide, let's take this to the society level. Here's how we might diagram Western American culture. Casoulis tells us, if a culture emphasizes the integrity orientation, then within integrity-defined relationships, it makes sense to understand the whole in terms of all the parts constituting it. That is, the whole consists only of all those parts and the way they relate. Thus, one might try to understand the political state in terms of individuals who have entered into this external relationship. Or we'd understand language in terms of words and sentences tied together in some way. We'd understand nature in terms of its flora, fauna, weather, topography, geology, and their connections. Or we'd understand ethics in terms of individuals related through rights and responsibilities. It's easy to see how this whole as parts diagram displays at its roots an integrity orientation. If the whole has its own integrity, it is an indivisible whole not open to further analysis. If the whole can be analyzed, then it can be broken down into the smallest units having integrity. These units are then the building blocks of the whole, and the only question for further analysis is how these little integrity units, these parts, are externally related to each other. In short, the discrete parts plus their external relations constitute the whole, and you can understand it that way. So now let's take a look at how an intimacy-dominant culture might be diagrammed. By contrast, Casoulis shows us, within the intimacy orientation, we cannot discuss the relations among the parts as something separate from the parts. The relation is in the overlap. Analysis will not begin with opposites and then locate phenomena in relation to those opposites. The opposite poles will be found within it. The polarities can never exist in themselves, even conceptually, as indivisible integers or units of integrity. A culture with an intimacy orientation is recursively fractal in its analysis. Each part can only be understood to be reflective of the whole. The part contains the whole just as much as the whole contains the part. We can use an analogy from cellular biology. Each cell in my body shares the same DNA chain, and each cell contains and ultimately derives from the genetic blueprint of the whole body. The whole and the part are in an intimate internal relationship. One cannot be understood without the other. Integrity's whole as parts diagram that we saw before is foreign to this intimacy orientation, in which each part can only be understood as reflective of the whole. So let's wrap up the reading with the next slide. To summarize, integrity, on the left, tends to think of the world as something external to be managed through knowledge. This model understands knowledge as being able to capture something out there through concepts and principles and words. Knowledge connects one to the world. It is the external relation between the knower and the known. Intimacy, however, on the right, tends to see the self and the world as interlinking, the goal being to develop a sense of belonging with the world, to feel at home in it. This model understands knowledge to reside in that interface between self and the world. It's embodied in persons embedded with their intimate community. Studying the world entails studying oneself as well. The intimacy model, the self is a holographic image of the whole, and knowledge occurs where the world and the self intersect. In sum, it seems that the best alternative as individuals and groups is to make ourselves culturally bi-orientational, similar to the way people can be bilingual. That is, if we acculturate ourselves to both orientations, we would be able to move fluidly between them, depending on whom we are with. The better we can adjust the way we analyze and communicate, the more successful we will be at establishing fruitful, pragmatic, and effective relationships with a diversity of others.
Good morning. I'm Maddie Burkemper, a new Sunday reader. Thanks, Pedro. And today's reading is from award-winning poet Laura Foley. To see it. We need to separate to see the life we've made. To leave our house where someone waits patiently, warm beneath the sheets. To don layers of armor, sweater, coat, mittens, scarf, to stride down the frozen road, putting distance between us this cold winter morning, to look back and see on the hilltop our life lit from inside.
Beautiful. Thank you. When I was in seminary with Aaron and Kendall, I had the opportunity to go to Chiapas, Mexico on a global justice trip with another professor and a few classmates to learn about the issues facing the communities down there. Indigenous villages of farmers and artisans, including the Zapatistas and international justice organizations. Before I left on that trip to Mexico, my grandpa asked me why I needed to travel so far away to learn about those things when there were plenty of people in need of justice right here at home. And today I might answer, well, Grandpa, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. Or in the more eloquent words of Laura Foley, we need to separate to see the life we've made, to look back and see on the hilltop our life lit from the inside. That trip was the first real experience I had as an adult of putting myself into a situation where I was truly an outsider. I couldn't speak the language, but somehow I still managed to form connections and even make jokes. So many of my unexamined assumptions got challenged, and I learned about the importance of utopia from our bus driver, and about international economics from a villager collecting firewood on a mountainside. And I had my own whiteness held up in front of me like a mirror as women and children followed me through marketplaces, begging me to buy their handicrafts with what they believed was my bottomless supply of American dollars. And yet, compared to their daily reality, was that not true? Alongside those experiences, I also saw an incredible depth of wisdom in the Zapatista Council of Good Governance. I sang in the tomb of Las Abejas on the anniversary of the Acteal massacre, alongside other travelers from around the world who had come to pay their respects. I joined the students for lunch in the cafeteria of La Universidad de la Tierra, where indigenous children came to learn a practical craft for their livelihood. I hiked a dormant volcano and was surrounded by a cloud of hummingbirds, each one believed to be the spirit of a visiting ancestor. I returned from that trip humbled, awed, and broken open, with an embodied experience of interconnection that I never would have understood if I had simply stayed home and read books. Even knowing intellectually about the various justice issues we have here at home, it took leaving my country to be able to see it more clearly, both its beauty and its brokenness, our capacity for both compassion and cruelty. Because of the deep intimacy I experienced on that trip, I later went on similar trips to the Philippines and to Guatemala and domestically to Phoenix and New Orleans and Selma and to Ocheti-Sakowin, the village of water protectors in North Dakota. Love called me on. And each time I came home to see the life I'd made lit from the inside. I saw myself as belonging to something bigger, stretching in all directions through history. Despite the fact that I had not personally committed the atrocities that I'd learned about both abroad and at home, I nonetheless felt complicit in my government's participation. And I began to see what Emma Lazarus and Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela meant when they said that until all of us are free, none of us are free. It was a movement from an understanding of my humanity as essentially independent to essentially interdependent, a movement from integrity towards intimacy. And I've wondered since then what it really means to be human, and why some of us are so ready to negate the humanity in another person. As we have encounters with people and places we think of as the other, those experiences challenge our assumptions about what separates us and makes us different. And we might begin to see how much we have in common and how truly interconnected we really are. Whether we're traveling to another country or volunteering at a local nonprofit, or even saying hello to a neighbor we haven't met before, we always have opportunities to engage in these encounters with someone with a different life experience and a different worldview, and we get to choose how we experience their humanity and how we let it affect us. I believe it's essential to our human nature to want to come together, for connection, for celebration, for solace. The pandemic has only made that more tragically obvious. We want to tell stories, to learn and to grow, to laugh and sing and dance, to play. We want to touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. And we want to explore the mysteries of the world, to dream of something beyond today, and to have the courage to step toward the source of reverence and awe and wonder, and to come back and share what we've seen. We bring our experiences to the shared altar of our lives, and we piece them together into stories of meaning and power until they come alive in us like a lit chalice. We were built for this. It is central to our humanity. The pandemic isolation truly heightened that for us. We may be able to survive alone in the most basic sense of survival, to get by with only a minimum of interaction with other people and the world around us. We can continue to exist without being able to gather, and in the context of a pandemic, we learned that in that specific context, to stay apart for a while was the most loving act of care we could express. But I think these past few years have demonstrated that humans were not built to thrive this way. And indeed, the only thing that got us to stop gathering was the threat of dying. And even as we gather once again, evidence abounds that we as a society are still healing from the impact of prolonged isolation. We need one another in the most fundamental and radical way. Here in the United States, in mainstream culture, we tend to believe that we are born a person, fully human. But did you know that in Japanese Zen Buddhism, one becomes a person? We can explore this more intricately by taking a look at the stylized Japanese calligraphy called kanji, historically derived from Chinese, and we have a few more slides to help illustrate. So, this first image is the basic kanji for person, or hito. You might imagine that it is a very simplified stick person walking. The hito is the person one perceives in everyday affairs. We might say hito in the same sense that we would say, who's that person over there? Or what kind of person are they? As in, what kind of character do they have? This kanji, hito, can be used in combination with other kanji to form more complex ideas, as we'll see in this next slide. Let's take a look at the Japanese word for individual, kojin. First, let's look at that printed kanji underneath the English word. You will recognize the kanji for hito on the right side of the pairing. So we know that this is a word related to person. And if you look at the left side, you might guess that those two lines outside the box are a more stylized version of hito. So we have a kanji that says person something person. The placement of that stylized hito next to a box surrounding another character says that this person is separated from whatever is in that box. So we have person separated from something person. The character inside the box represents the world. So on the next slide, I've parsed it out here. So an individual in Japanese is a person separated from the world person. It describes someone who is isolated, extracted from their context. Kojin is not used to talk about people as humans, but as items to be counted, their identities removed. Given our understanding of the Japanese culture of intimacy, of how our sense of self is defined by our relationships in the world around us, the very concept of kojin as an isolated individual is painful and very nearly useless in the context of understanding humanity. It's a very lonely expression, a person separated from the world person, and it has very little to do with what we mean by human. But if we proceed in the other direction, to add a character to put hito into context, we arrive at the kanji for ningen, human being. So let's take a look. With ningen, you can see in the print form that the character hito is to the left of the second character, and in the more stylized calligraphy on the right there, you can see hito is placed above the second character, but they're the same kanji. That second character, that is not hito, has two parts. Essentially, there are the two boxes on top of what could be poles, and then the single box underneath in between the two poles. The two boxes on top of the poles are the kanji for door. My teacher tells me that we can imagine they're like the swinging doors in a Western saloon, right? So you can see those doors. And then that smaller box below the doors is a celestial body, like a sun, shining a bright light. So again, I've parsed it out on the next slide. So what does this kanji tell us about what it means to be human? If the doors are completely shut and you turn all the lights off, and on the other side of the door you shine a bright light like a sun, you will see the light coming through the cracks wherever it can, wherever there's an opening between the doors. In the words of Leonard Cohen, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. There's no containing the radiance of the celestial body. The light gets through the cracks, and because the doors are closed, the light exists between them, in the cracks. And so that light coming through the cracks in the door means between. Ningen is a person between. A person who sees themselves primarily as a between is a description of what it means to be human, to be connected. To be kojin, an individual, to be a person separate from the world person, isolated and out of context, is to be something other than human. To the Japanese, the betweenness is what defines a human being. The interconnected context that gives a hito a full identity in relationship to everything around them and allows us to become ningen, a human being. We can end the slideshow here. Our beloved Minnesotan UU singer-songwriter Peter Mayer has a song that explores the question of what the universe was made of before the Big Bang created matter as we know it. He points out that since we don't know, it could be anybody's guess. So would it be crazy to suggest, what if love is all it was? And what if that love still sings, is still alive in everything, moving through the whole universe, rising in the light and dark, hiding in the smallest part, burning like a flame that always burns, like atoms, like the air, invisible but everywhere? What if love were the organizing force by which the beauty of the world emerged, that joined the particles into molecules and living cells and redwood trees and bees and birds? And what if to act on love's behalf, to practice kindness, is the most natural thing of all? A friend recently shared with me that in Japan, there's a common interpretation of that basic kanji for person, hito. And you can actually join me for this part. You need your hands. Take your left hand, like this, and support it with your right hand. There you go. You've got the kanji for hito right there. According to a popular Japanese children's TV show in the 1980s, the kanji for hito looks like this: one person holding up and sustaining another person. In other words, it is a person precisely because a person and another person are supporting each other. A person gets support from other people and their community, and through that support grows and develops as a human. Now, that is not actually an accurate or scholarly deconstruction of that kanji for hito, But since you now understand the cultural orientation towards intimacy in relationships and worldviews, you can understand why this interpretation would have broad public appeal in Japan, particularly in a children's show where they're wanting to instill good values in the next generation. This is what it means to be a person. And regardless of its technical accuracy, it points us in the direction of ningen, of a full human being existing in the betweenness of relationship. I just love that image of the celestial light shining through the cracks between the doors, or maybe the cracks in our hearts or in our lives. A light which, according to Peter Mayer, could just be love, still alive in everything since the beginning of time. And I can't help but link it in my own mind to the idea that to become human is to cultivate ourselves, to allow the light of the celestial bodies, the original love that existed back before the Great Big Bang, our own inherent natural kindness, to shine through us, out through our hidden cracks, until we are radiant and beautiful. And even with our own broken parts, nobody seeing us could say that we are anything less than whole. In the words of Peter Mayer, then when we feel undone or sick because we've been spun around on the wheel of despair, we can just breathe it in, reach for that source again, reach out to what's already there, the mystery from whence we came. And just for a song, let's give it a name. What if love is all it was?
Science has revealed at last what happened in the distant past, back in the beginning of time. But from what the cosmos came, back before the Great Big Bang, it's finding more hard to describe. Could be anybody's guess. So is it crazy to suggest, what if love, what if love, what if love is all it was? What if love, what if love, what if love is all it was? What if that love still sings, is still alive in everything, moving through the whole universe, rising in the light and dark, hiding in the smallest part, burning like a flame that always burns, like the atoms, like the air, invisible, but everywhere. What if love, what if love, what if love is all it was? What if love, what if love, what if love is all it was? What if love were the organizing force by which the beauty of the world emerged, that joined the particles and the molecules and living cells and redwood trees and bees and birds? And what if to act on love's behalf, to practice kindness, is the most natural thing of all? Then when we feel undone, we're sick because we've been spun around on the wheel of despair. We could just breathe it in, reach for that source again, reach out to what's already there. song. Let's give it a name. What if love? What if love? What if love is all you want? What if love? What if love? What if love is all you want? What if love? What if love? What if love? What if love? What if love is all you want? What if love? What if love? What if love? What if love? What if love is all you want?
It can be hard sometimes to see that light in ourselves, to trust that it's there shining through the cracks of our betweenness, calling others to join us in this human experience we call life. We may need to separate to see the life we've made, to leave our house, to look back and see on the hilltop our life lit from the inside, like the light of a celestial body gleaming through the crack in the doors. So as we close our service today, remember your connection to the world. Hold it against your bones, knowing that it is what makes you human, a person between, in relation to all things. As you go on your way this afternoon, remember that to act on love's behalf, to practice kindness, is the most natural thing of all. Because after all, love is a musical thing, and you are supposed to sing or to dance while the music is being played. May it be so, and amen.
Just as long as